Hello! I have something for the Jane Eyre aficionados today. Last November, I read and reviewed the Classics Illustrated graphic novel of Jane Eyre. As an adaptation, it left a lot to be desired. But oh my goodness, did I have a good time reviewing it. I recently found out that through my library, I have access to 2 more Jane Eyre graphic novels. Serendipity! So, considering how much fun I had the first time, I thought I would give it another try. This is the classical comics adaptation of Jane Eyre, copyright 2008, with a script by Amy Corzine and artwork by John M. Burns. Even though I'm not much of a graphic novel or comic book reader, I am familiar with classical comics. I have read parts of their adaptations of Fahrenheit 451 and Frankenstein. Both of those stuck very closely to the source material, so I was looking forward to this, and oh boy, was it a treat. I actually lucked out here. The classical comics people sell 2 versions of the adaptations they make, the original text version and the quick text version, which has more modernized language and is slightly more abbreviated. I didn't know that there were 2 versions to choose from when I ordered this, but fortunately, the library sent me the original text version, which is the one I would have wanted, so phew. It's very difficult to show this to you because it's so floppy and because there's a glare, but the book includes some interesting front and back matter, including a 2-page explanation of the behind-the-scenes making-of process and how they illustrated it and copied the text. The story itself runs for 126 pages. It reads very quickly. I got through it in 2 sittings, 2 delightful sittings. It's printed on nice glossy paper, which makes it very smooth to the touch, and I know the glare is kind of bad if I hold it just the wrong way, but believe me, it has vibrant colors and lovely shading and just a great overall design. But best of all, it's so close to the book. It has so many original lines and every character included. I guess it's the nature of comic books that things happen very fast and you fly along from one thing to another. That was a little hard for me to get used to, as was the pattern of reading. There are a couple instances where you're just like, do I go to the right or am I supposed to go down now? Which one do we do first? But I got used to it. Here are some highlights from the book, starting with Helen. I thought Helen was beautifully handled. I thought that her strong, positive, calming influence on young Jane really came through, and she wasn't just squeezed into a couple of trite panels. I like the way adult Jane is drawn. Really, all of John M. Burns' illustrations are great, but Jane is the focal point of many of the panels, and I think he did a really good job of giving her a variety of expressions. They are subtle enough to be believable, but they communicate a lot of different emotions without ever making her cartoonish. I also really like the way Rochester is drawn. His Rochester, I think, most resembles Timothy Dalton in appearance, especially in profile, and with all the small bits of dialogue that were included, I kept being reminded of the 83 version as well as the 73 version. Basically, the voices of Timothy Dalton and Michael Jaston were having a fight for dominance in my head. And, the things they kept in and the way they chose to illustrate them. For example, the little green men are included, which in and of itself is exciting if you're on the lookout for those things. I think it's actually illustrated as something that Adele is trying to picture here, but it also shows Rochester's mental image of Jane as a fairy in the horse scene. And that is so different. That is a unique twist that they did a couple of times. I think my favorite instance of it is later on towards the end when Rochester is trying to picture what St. John looks like, and he keeps altering his mental image based on the descriptions that Jane gives him. It's really funny, and that whole scene was lifted right out of the book, practically. So much cuteness. I don't mean to go on and on, but it just amazes me all the things that they chose to keep in. Like in the proposal scene, the little line, "Jane, come and look at this fellow." Yeah, that's in there. They didn't have to keep that. And if you look at how this book does it compared to how the Classics Illustrated version does it, where they just smushed the proposal into one measly panel, this is just so much more satisfying. There was a funny thing that happened. As I was reading later on in the book, I thought it was interesting that the narrative was spending so much time with Sinjin, and it actually ended with him. But then I went and I checked the original book, and surprise, I'd forgotten that that's how the original book ends too. But that's how faithful this comic book is, folks. Even Sinjin, who hardly anybody likes, gets fully fleshed out here, faults and all. So with all this enthusiasm, any complaints I have seem awfully insignificant. Like, oh, they have a stairs scene, but I noticed he didn't say if I had time I'd find out what this means. But come on! At least they have a stairs scene, and he does say goodnight, which is something that's not included in a lot of movie versions. There is a gypsy scene, yay, but this is one of those gypsy scenes where there's a lot of build-up, and then Jane's with the gypsy for like half a minute, and then she's figured it out, and we've moved on. The point of the gypsy scene seemed to be to put Blanche off, rather than probing Jane's feelings and trying to get her to talk about Rochester, and I don't know, it was kind of a letdown. I could say that the scene where Jane takes leave of Rochester before returning to Gateshead is too abrupt, that I noticed that the painful discussion about governesses among the guests was gone, that Mary and Diana Rivers were not clearly delineated enough. I couldn't tell which one was which. They didn't really seem to have individual personalities. But when I consider all the things that they did keep in and how tastefully and artfully done it is, I really can't justify getting upset about any of these things. It tells Jane's whole story in a way that I think can appeal to existing fans and newcomers alike. Does it draw in younger readers? I have no idea. I probably would have liked it. I think some of the language might be a little tricky. Even I had to pause over cicatrized visage. But I'd rather a book challenge its readers to attain a higher reading level than try to dumb down the original by watering the life out of it. And that's what I think about that. I don't know anything about the members of the creative team behind this, but they seem like people who have a love and appreciation for the classics, including Jane Eyre, who wanted to make this graphic novel aesthetically pleasing and enticing while remaining as faithful as possible to the original's language and themes, and that makes me extremely happy. And as for any of the little things that didn't get included, I think they'll be an extra surprise for anyone who picks up the graphic novel and enjoys it enough to move on to the original book. And that's a good thing. Thanks for watching! Bye!